Welcome to the Horn Talk YouTube channel. It's a partnership between Africa Policy Institute and the Council of Kenya-Somalia Relation. In this channel, we'll be discussing the issues affecting the Horn of Africa and the emergence of middle powers and how they affect the geopolitics in this region. Thank you.
Now, what has happened is that this month, I think on the 16th of this month, Ethiopia hosted the troop contributing countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, and Djibouti, a ministerial meeting. And in that meeting, Somalia was not invited. And it is supposed to be the one hosting these troops. These are not peacekeepers, they are stabilization forces, meaning they are there at the behest of the state. But Somalia was not invited to that meeting. And the meeting was supposed to be discussing the transition from ATMIS now to the new AU stabilization force. Now, at the same time, Somalia undertook a very heavy, subtle diplomacy, moving to Burundi, to Djibouti, to Uganda, and finally to Kenya yesterday, with the aim of ensuring that there is no gap in that transition from ATMIS to AUSOM, which can be exploited by Al-Shabaab, the way Taliban did in Afghanistan, and basically destabilized that particular country, and that story is now familiar. Now, against that backdrop, a crowd is now hanging over the Horn, because by November 13, Somaliland is supposed to hold election. And in that election, Muse Bihi Abdi is seeking a second term. Bihi is backed lock, stock, and barrel by Addis Ababa, because Addis Ababa want to secure the mission, want to secure an ally in the region in its quest to get a port and a naval base, not a port, a naval base in the Red Sea, because that is Ethiopia's ambition. And of course, the worst nightmare for Mogadishu is the victory of Bihi in the coming election, because that is going to really disturb Mogadishu in terms of its ability and its desire to negotiate with Somaliland over the unification and what that means forever. And that is the remaining agenda for President Sheikh Amin Mohamud. That is what Hassan Sheikh is literally working out to see, that after the integration to the international financial systems, the lifting of the embargo, arms embargo, the inclusion in the East African community, becoming a member of the UN Security Council, a non-permanent member, the unsolved issue for Somalia is the discussions leading to the unification of the two Somalis, Somaliland and Somalia. So it is a this election therefore is a big issue for Hassan Sheikh and Mogadishu. Finally, we do know that Ethiopia has gone ahead now to make good its promise to recognize Somaliland. Last week, it gave land to Somaliland, and the foreign minister of Somaliland went to Addis Ababa and broke ground for a new embassy, the first ever for Somaliland. So they have broken ground, they are building embassy, and this, to all intents and purposes, means that Ethiopia recognizes Somaliland as a sovereign state, because you don't allow people to have an embassy. They can have a consulate, but they cannot have a full-fledged embassy, but this time they do have. Now, Somalia on its part, and we have already discussed in the past, Somalia, the role of Egypt, or the role of middle powers in the region. But we want to move further and see how Somalia is concretizing its diplomatic efforts to circle wagons around Ethiopia. So on the 10th of October, we had a high-level meeting or summit, as it were, of 3 countries, which was very unusual. One was Eritrea, the other one was Egypt, and the other one was Somalia. And these are countries, except Sudan, that control the Red Sea on the African side. The only missing country in that area was Sudan. And therefore, there is a huge concern by these 3 countries. And Turkey is in the equation, although it was not invited to this particular summit. But the summit is Eritrea, Egypt, and and Somalia. Djibouti, of course, supports all these efforts to secure, for Somalia to secure its sovereignty, because it's the next. For Eritrea, it is worried that Ethiopia is simply delaying attacking it and getting the port of Masaba or Assam, not Masawa or Assam. So it is a delay tactic, and therefore Eritrea is striking fast. And that also signifies the fallout after the Tigray War, which Eritrea supported Ethiopia, but was never recognized in the peace deal that ended the war. And therefore it feels betrayed, guilted, and this cannot given its due respect in regard to this. And it is in this context, therefore, that we find ourselves in this situation. What has been what have been the attempts to resolve this issue? There was a lot of hope that the intervention of Turkey and Turkey's determination to hold discussions or talks between Ethiopia and Somalia in Accra would lead to some resolution of the dispute peacefully. But after a few rounds, Somalia insisted that the condition for any talk would be for Ethiopia to renounce the MOU and to recognize its sovereignty. And Ethiopia doesn't seem to be ready to recognize that sovereignty insofar as Somalia understands. So for Abiy Ahmed, the die is cast that he has to get a port, either Rubuk or Kruk. He has to get a port of the Red Sea. And for Somalia, it's not an inch of its soil. So that is the whole issue, not an inch, and we need an inch in the Red Sea. That's the whole issue. So today, I wanted us to delve into these issues. That's just a background to enable us to get into this discussion. And I'll try to act as a moderator of this discussion. From what we have said, from what we have done as an overview, Mheshimiwa Hassan, what do you think? Are we sailing? Are we heading to Armageddon, or are we okay?
Yeah, no, I think there is a very serious crisis in the Horn of Africa, particularly if you look at the confrontation between Somalia and Ethiopia as a result of Ethiopia's imperial breach. Ethiopia feels it's a powerful country in the Horn of Africa. It feels constrained, landlocked. It's flexing its muscles, and it has selected Somalia as the weakest point in this particular case, because one would think that Eritrea would have been the port of Assam is the closest post that Ethiopia could aspire to be. And this is very unusual in the sense that in the past, it was Somalia that was seen to be playing against the rules-based international order. It was Somalia that was the expansionist, the herenditist, looking at Ethiopia to liberate the Somali region there, looking at Kenya to bring and create the greater Somalia concept. Ethiopia has always defended itself from the Second World War, when Italy invaded it, which led to the breakup of the League of Nations. Finally, Ethiopia is saying we don't care about the rule-based international system. We don't care about the the deeply rooted African concept of inviolability of colonial borders. We have our eyes on getting a naval base. And in this particular case, it is a naval base on another African country's territory. This is unprecedented. There's no, there are secret deals, there are maybe countries that harbor dreams of accessing other nations' space. But this is the first time when a major African country, which is also the headquarters of the African Union, and a strong member of the United Nations, is saying, we don't care about that. We have a weak country next to us, and we're going to occupy that space, regardless of what Somalia thinks. Now, Somalia has done extremely well in the sense that previously it was isolated diplomatically. It simply didn't have the muscle to challenge Ethiopia on the African stage. Ethiopia was the African giant. Every African country felt Ethiopia was the anchor for African unity and Africa's diplomatic future. And now it has campaigned to expose Ethiopia as a villain, as a country that wants to dismember Somalia. And it has been very successful both in Africa and internationally to turn the tables against Ethiopia, to say Ethiopia is wrong. So it has got the support of IGAD, it has got the support of the African Union, it has gone to the League of Arab States, it's gone to the United Nations, it's gone to the European Union. All the major powers, the Americans, the European Union, the Chinese, are saying that they respect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Somalia. And therefore, Ethiopia has been asked to back down. However, we have a unique situation in the case of Ethiopia. First of all, Ethiopia is in a great turmoil. You have the Tigrayan rebellion, which a devastating war that has cost the lives of 1 million people. What some people would say was a genocide. There is a terrible war going on in the Amhara region, the most important nation in Ethiopia, the ruling nation of Ethiopia. The Abyssinia, the heartland of Abyssinia, is now in turmoil. We have the Oromo nation, which the President Abiy comes from, which is waging multiple guerrilla wars in the western region, in the eastern region, and in the central region. And now the focus of Abiy, who considers himself like a successor of Menelik, the protector and of the Ethiopian imperial dream, is looking to get a way into the Indian Ocean, into the Red Sea, and he has put his focus on Somaliland, and he's arguing that Somaliland has entered an agreement with him, and come what may, that is going to happen, as you have just said. So I think there is a crisis there, and I think there's another fallacy here. There's another misconception here that Somalia is seen as weak, but it has shown that with Hassan Sheikh has done very well. He's become a great diplomat. The other thing that Somalia has is a well-armed militia population. People dismiss that as insignificant. It doesn't have a military force that can challenge Ethiopia. But it has a population which is heavily armed, nationalistic, particularly when it comes to a foreign power, and particularly a foreign power that has historical problems with Somalia, historical injustices, an imperial power that They have fought several wars, including the 1977 war, in which Ethiopia was defeated, in fact, but was helped by the international community to protect its territorial integrity. Russia, the Soviet Union, and Cuba in particular. So you have that situation in which you disregard that at your own peril. So it is, I think it is to occupy and create a naval base in Somaliland is a pipe dream. It's not attainable. To build that road, to build that railway, to create a major military base there, you have to militarize the entire Somali region of Ethiopia and the whole of the western Somaliland, which is not possible for a country that is facing a number of conflicts. The second element is that the international community is not in support of this. If you look at the Americans, the Chinese, everybody is saying no, no, no. So it will be seen as a major violation. And finally, of course, Somalia has been able to bring on board my enemy's enemy is my friend, Egypt. Egypt has come to their rescue. They have signed a defense agreement with Egypt. They've also signed a defense agreement with Turkey. And then there are other kind of middle power actors, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar. So this problem is going to be internationalized. But don't forget that the local militia that I have mentioned, the armed militia, we're not talking about Al-Shabaab. There is no Al-Shabaab in Somaliland. But the people of Audal region, which is the region where Ethiopia is focused on, are already preparing. They're getting armed, they're getting training from both the Somali government, indirectly, and also from Djibouti. In terms of clan politics, the Audal region's population spills into Djibouti, and it also spills into Ethiopia. So Dirdawa, the train to Djibouti, is protected by this particular community because it's the same clan. So there is a partnership between Djibouti and Ethiopia, and that partnership enables the Isa clan to protect that railway line. Had it not been for that reason,
So it's the Isa clan.
yes, it's the Isa, which is President Gulei's
Gulei's
clan.
clan.
They are from Audal in Somaliland. So they're getting politicized, they're getting securitized, and I can see that at the moment I don't see a face-saving exit for Abiy. Abiy is not going to, he doesn't have space to retreat. If you look at the history of imperial Ethiopia, leaders have to be strong. If a leader shows any sign of weaknesses, they are immediately removed. And every leader in Ethiopia's history, apart from Mengistu Haile Mariam, has been decapitated. Once you lose authority, you get removed from power in a very violent way. So he doesn't have that. Luxury of saying no. I've changed my mind. The MOU is not is no more, and we're going to talk to Somalia or Ethiopia or Djibouti for other options. And then there is the growing tripartite agreement between Egypt, Somalia, and Eritrea. And I put an emphasis on Eritrea here. You know, Eritrea is the second weak point when it comes to Ethiopia. Ethiopia is looking at Eritrea, and it has opted for Somaliland because Eritrea is the most powerful military force, the biggest military power in the region. It is not going to give in. And so Afarwake wants to be done with Abiy. So he is playing a key role in bringing this security agreement between Egypt and Somalia, and maybe eventually with Djibouti, because Djibouti is suspicious of Eritrea. You know, Djibouti has a very large large Afar population, and half of Eritrea is Afar. it's a minority controlled by the Tigrayans that spills over into Djibouti. So they've had conflicts, they've had border conflicts, but it appears now they are talking to each other and finding diplomatic solutions. So in conclusion, I would say that the situation is not as easy as it looks from the Ethiopian side, and it's not as dire when you look at the Somali side to say that this is a weak power that will be overrun by the militarily superior Ethiopia. You should remember that in 206, Ethiopia invaded Somalia and occupied Mogadishu. What a lot of people haven't written about or have not done analysis of that eventually Ethiopia suffered humiliating military defeat. Not by a major military, by another army, by the Mogadishu militia. That eventually Ethiopia suffered humiliating military defeat. Not by a major military, by another army, by the Mogadishu militia.
Yep.
They were chucked out of Somalia by armed militia, not Al-Shabaab. Yes, and they fled having lost thousands. Zanawi was kind of a level-headed leader who decided to cut his costs quickly and withdrew quietly. But the United States, for example, wanted Ethiopia to stay on and pacify the rest of the country, which they didn't want to do. So I think the situation is fluid. It is unlikely that Ethiopia would back down. It is unlikely that Somalia would accept part of its territory to be occupied, and therefore the consequences could be a direct military action in that part of the home.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for that. I think one need perhaps to just recap a few things for the sake of our records. And what I find interesting in Mheshimiwa's analysis is the whole idea of Somalia's transformation from an ideological standpoint, from the country that was looking for what are called lost territories in Kenya, Djibouti, and Ethiopia, to a country now that is accommodating itself to the region. And on a non-attribution basis, I had a conversation with the president, Hassan, and it was interesting the way he put it, and I think it would be interesting to bring this to the public space. That he said, we were the people in the past who were accused of, claiming other people's territories, Kenya, some Djibouti, and Ethiopia. But we find ourselves now in a situation that even what we have kept is being taken away. I found that a very profound statement, that even what we have, we are not claiming any other territory anymore. But now it is us who are to defend the little or the what was kept, what we remained as our territory.
But also, just one point that I think people don't understand about Somaliland.
Yeah.
Somaliland is the heart of Somalia.
Yes.
It's the Somaliland that led the independent struggle.
Yes.
Somaliland is the home of the Somali language, culture, and poetry.
Yes.
Yes. The historical memory of the Somali nation. It's also the origin of the Somali ethnic group.
Yeah.
So to lose Somaliland means Somalia would not exist as a country, to be honest.
Yes.
That's the emotional, historical aspect that a lot of people don't understand. It's not just the territory.
In other words, Somalia without Somaliland would be a country without a soul.
Yeah.
Simply put, would not have a soul. So I think that is something to keep in mind, that there has been the movement, I called it the other day, the movement from the greater Somalia to global Somalia. Greater Somalia meaning you want to claim other people's territories and claiming these are Ross lands. But now you have become global. And the argument is that Somalia is now in Tanzania, it is in Uganda, it is here in Kenya in a big way, and it is in Ethiopia, basically having ministerial positions.
There are more Somalis in Ethiopia than in Somalia itself,
Yes.
in terms of population.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Yes,
It's
yes.
the older
Yes,
yes.
Yeah.
It's almost similar to, there are more Oromos here than in
In
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, yes. There are more Oromos in Kenya than in
No,
Ethiopia.
no,
No, yeah.
no. The Oromos in Ethiopia are almost 70% of the Ethiopian population. Abi is an Oromo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Oromo go all the way up to Addis Ababa.
Yeah, they go all the way to Sudan. From
Yes.
Sudan to the Somali border, to the Kenyan border. It's the largest ethnic group in the Horn,
Yeah.
the Horn region.
Yeah.
I think maybe the Hausa or the Zulu.
It is the Hausa or the Malinke, or we call them
Well, it's
the
the
wall of
Hausa
the wall,
family.
the wall of the Hausa family. No, there is the Hausa in, yeah, I think it's the large Hausa
The
family.
Hausa Fulani.
Fulani in northern Nigeria,
It's
Chad,
quite
Chad,
huge. You know, I mean, there's a perception that, you know, the Amharas, which is the ruling elite that has ruled Ethiopia, is only 25% of the population.
yeah.
But they had the elite, they had the military, they're the most educated. And the Oromos were were peasants. It's just like the Hutu Tutsi factor. Yeah, in Burundi.
I think Prof is
The-
fearing to give this comparison from what Mheshimiwa was saying and what you're saying. Is it safe to say in Kenyan language that the Oromo are the mountain of Somalia?
Yes.
I mean Ethiopia.
Yeah, Ethiopia, yeah. We are the Murimas. The Murimas of
Yeah, but there are
Ethiopia.
60, 70 million, we're talking about huge.
Yes, it's a huge population. Now, before I leave, Mheshimiwa, Hassan, let me also capture the other main point he made, that the current crisis is an exploitation of the weakness of Somalia at the present. Otherwise, if Somalia was strong and would go to war the way it did in 1977, Ethiopia would not dare have an MOU with a breakaway territory. But that also tells a lot about Ethiopia. Ethiopia was able to build the dam, the great Renaissance Dam, riding on the weakness of Egypt. And Egypt is paying the price of the Arab uprising, because it was at the heart of the uprising that Ethiopia built the dam. Otherwise, had it done that earlier, the Cairo would not have allowed it to happen. With its military, with its air force and everything, but Egypt was at its weakest ever after the removal of Hosni Mubarak and the coming of the regime of Morsi, who did not understand very much about the issues here. And finally, by the time the current President Al-Sisi comes to force, we are saying that Ethiopia had completed the dam. So I think it will want to exploit the weakness of Somalia now. And by the time Somalia is up and running, it already has a huge naval base on the mouth, on the Red Sea, the Gulf of Eden, and the entrance to the Suez Canal, and the Red Sea itself and the Suez Canal. Now that is Egypt's problem, because Egypt is the fiber optic cables are going through the Red Sea, and they are linking Egypt and the rest of the world, and Egypt has that mandate, and therefore Ethiopia is going to control this. And Ethiopia has already complained, particularly within the ongoing BRIC summit. One of the major Ethiopia's complaint is that Egypt has more than its due share of the control of the fiber optic connection in the world. And I tweeted that, it's part of my Twitter, about that now dispute. I did see that angle, that there is not just communication by sea, but there is now the new technologies that are benefiting Egypt because of its location, because the fiber optic cables have to pass through there. So that exploitation of the weakness, and that's why Mheshimiwa is right when he says that under normal circumstances, Ethiopia would have attacked the port of Assab. This is the port that the famous lady, Queen of Sheba, used. This is the port they used to import all their arms so that they can fight the Italians. It's the port they have used forever, and it was the naval base of Ethiopia until 1993. So it is when Eritrea became independent, or gained its independence, that they lost the 2 ports of Massawa and Assam. So naturally, and for the Amhara, and why the Eritreans were very, very suspicious of the Tigrayans and the Amhara, is because the two would not think about Somalia. They would go straight for Assam and Massawa. And in fact, the Amhara have never forgiven Meles for ceding those ports. But now, Abiy finds a vent in Somaliland, Somaliland territory of Somalia. So it is good to keep that again in context, and thanks Mheshimiwa for
just
for
one point
pointing us
about
back.
one aspect about Abiy's obsession with Somaliland is that there is another perception that Abiy is giving up the Amhara Tigray region. He feels that they will eventually break away, and that he wants to build a greater Cushitic alliance. And he has supported a number of conflicts between the Somali Oromo to highlight the relationship. A Cushitic alliance will be able to defend itself against the Semitic Amhara, Tigrayna, Eritrea, because they're all the same. And this is what he did with Farmajo. When he was forming an alliance with Farmajo, the idea was to unite the two countries and therefore have a Cushitic, a greater Cushitic nation with access to the Indian Ocean. He kept on saying, you have all the fish, you have all the sea, we have all the water, we combine our resources, our natural resources, and we will be a great power in Africa and in the whole of Africa. So there is that element, I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
You did a piece some times ago about the Cushitic.
Yes, I'm the one who is really famous for my Cushitic alliance thesis, and I went on to explore what it means by Cushitic consciousness. In the context of Cushitic consciousness, Abiy thinks that the Somalis are feeble-minded. He doesn't think big about the Somalis because he thinks that if they pursue the Cushitic consciousness, they control the whole of the coast of the Red Sea, much of the coast of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, up to Lamu. Yes, up to Lamu. Yes, all that is part of what he envisaged as a greater. So he, in a sense, is behaving like what we call the Martinique, the German unifiers. Those who are Bismarck, those who are unifying Germany. This is how he sees himself as an empire builder. And because the Somalis are resisting, he cannot understand, he cannot even make sense of it. He just thinks that these are damn, feeble-minded part of the Cushitic people. That they should behave and know that the empire is better than all of them. And this is, so in a sense, Abiy cannot see why Hassan Sheikh will be so feeble-minded as to even raise a finger about this naval base at the mouth of the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden. And basically the Somalis are resisting the Red Sea, and he cannot understand, so he cannot see what is happening. He thinks that Abiy is the most enlightened of all the Cushitic leaders of the region. Farmajo, of course, was very enlightened. Is better than all of them. And he's already beginning to see, until you enter into his mind and understand what is his anguish. For us, the norm is different. So now, let's now move to. Are you?
So I was just waiting to hear.
He thinks that that's what we want to move to. But we wanted to exhaust some margins because we have had discussions about this issue. He's already beginning to see. Until we now get to the end of this matter. Until you enter into his mind. Now let me understand what is his anguish. For us, the norm can't be.
Thank you, Prof.
So now let's
very interesting conversation.
No, I was just waiting to hear.
That's what we want to. But we wanted to exhaust some of these because we have had discussions about this issue. Until we now get to the depth of this matter. Now let me then call in Daktari.
I mentioned it to my students in one class. Thank you, Prof. Very interesting describe the Horn of Africa as generally about the sick man, the Horn of Africa, which I have. Because when you look at what is happening now, characteristically, that has been the history of this region. I'm not my historian, so the chance of looking at things historically and evolved to where we are answers many of the problems that we are grappling with. You see, when you look at this region, look at belligerent countries that we are talking about now, Somalia and Ethiopia, characteristically, they are generally kind of what I see as victims of their own histories. Let's, for example, begin with Somalia. Chance of looking at things. Somalia has a rich history. When we are talking about the Kushites. If you trace back to the ancient kingdom as the Egyptians described them, and the organization and dominance in that region, and the nature of their expansion, which from the 7th century onwards, Somalia has a rich history. Is really bolstered in ways that extend their influence almost to the southern part of the East African coast. Because we were, you know this, when Islam comes to the Eastern African coast, it first started from Somalia. And then the Somalis helped by the establishment of the sultanates, which influences a greater part of what we now call is really bolstered in ways that then quick way forward to modern day Somalia begins in the 60s, like any African countries, goes through the curse of the African big man syndrome. I'm sure we all know how Said Barre galvanized Somalia using the socialist inclination during the ideological East-West Cold War struggles of the 1960s. Forward to the 90s, the state of Somalia collapses. And collapses in some way that a few people thought it was irredeemable, which led to the resurgence of semi-autonomous regions. We were talking about Somalia, galvanized, Puntland, talking about Jubaland, and then many others. East-West. Then the militias coming in quite strongly to fill in the void. Talking about Al-Shabaab, and we're talking about the influence of Al-Qaeda, and creates an environment of challenged governance, very unstable internal politics, which have a spin-off effect to the region, Kenya on one side, Ethiopia on the other, and then many other militias coming regions. But then the country of Somalia has always been seen or looked at with a lot of suspicion. An environment of challenging government, what Professor Korwada describes as Somali identity, which have a spin-off the dream of a greater Somalia, including the north of Kenya, where you have people of Somali origins, the Ogaden, Ethiopia, Djibouti, but then and all that. So there has been this suspicion. But in recent years, Somalia has demonstrated that all hope is not lost. Professor Korwada described Somali, enumerated the recent development of membership in the ESC, the membership in Kenya, when some relative stability,
Ethiopia, Djibouti, and
this has
so there has been this suspicion, but in recent years, Somalia has demonstrated
it is actually things are looking at.
All hope is not
this
lost.
first time in around 3 or 4 decades now. Things are looking at for Somalia.
The recent development, the membership
Sheikh,
the ESC, the
very strong
membership
shuttle diplomacy,
UN, some relative
we are
stability.
beginning to say that finally
This has excited
is
a
coming
bit of
back
interest from the international community over the welfare.
if you look at Ethiopia on the other side,
all of us were saying
it has gone
it
through
is actually things are looking at
through the
for this first time
these,
around 3 or 4 decades. Things are
landscapes
looking
of
for
up
Somalia.
and downs, just
And
like
President Hassan Sheikh
was
is
surprised
very strong shuttle diplomacy.
Ethiopia is strong.
We were
Both
beginning
countries
to say
have
that
their
finally
own weaknesses.
hope
That
is
cannot
coming
make
back
them sustain a strong military campaign.
if you look at Ethiopia on the other side,
Ethiopia just like
it has
Somalia.
gone through historically through these landscapes of up and downs, just like Somalia. I was surprised to say that Ethiopia is strong. See, both countries have their own weaknesses that cannot make them sustain a strong military campaign against each other. Ethiopia, just like Somalia, again, an ancient land of the ancient kingdom of Aksum, Kush. You just talked about the queen of Sheba, the legacy of Menelik I and II that sees the Ethiopians not being able to be colonized by the Italians. Then the monarchy falls off in the 70s. There comes the revolutionary regime, the Marxist ideology that informed the revolutionary regime that toppled King Haile Selassie. Then Ethiopia, just like Somalia, starts going gradually down the drain. But the peak of it comes with the secession of Eritrea, which actually takes what I regard as the golden goose that laid the golden eggs. The two port cities of Massawa and Assam, which Ethiopia depended for its power in the region. Actually, when it controlled the port areas of Massawa and Assam, Ethiopia was a very hegemonic power in the whole of the Horn of Africa. It played perhaps the role Kenya for a long time until recently. It played in Eastern Africa, or the big brother.
The monarchy falls off in the 70s.
West Africa.
There comes the revolution.
But then, because of that weakness, and then the internal conflicts that King Haile Selassie.
Then Ethiopia, just like Somalia,
The problem of
starts going gradually down the
civil war that involved
the peak of it
all that.
comes with the cessation of Eritrea, which actually takes
Somalia.
what I regard
I have
as
this belief that
the
they
golden
cannot,
goose that lay
in any meaningful way, with a
port
strong,
cities of Massawa
sustained, and well-resourced
Assam,
military
which Ethiopia
challenge
depended
in any
for
other
its
country, let
power
alone
in the region.
Somalia.
Actually, when
Somalia
it controlled
has
the port
a
areas of
strength
Massawa and
of
Assam,
too.
Ethiopia was a
They
very
not
hegemonic
have, well-organized,
the Horn of
standing
Africa.
military
It played
arrangement
perhaps
like
the role
other
Kenya
countries.
for a long time
But it has
until
very
recently
strong
played in Eastern Africa.
armed
nationalistic.
or the big brother Nigeria
There's no doubt about
plays in West
For those
Africa.
of us without that, remember that
But then
in
because
1994
of
the
that
Americans
weakness and then
thought they
the
were
internal
going
conflicts
Somalia and
we
Syria.
talked about,
They were
problem of
totally
the
listened
Tigrayan
by
region,
ragtag militia
the
men
problem of
in the streets of
the civil war,
yeah, that
Oromos and
kind
all
of
that.
strong
Ethiopia is
nationalistic
actually as
approach
weak
to the whole thing
as
will actually not enable
Somalia.
Ethiopia to stage a
I
strong,
have this
sustained
belief that
and a resource to military
they
presence
cannot
in the
in
region
any
as they
meaningful
think,
way
in my view.
with
That
a strong,
what I call in my
sustained,
lectures
and
SSR,
well resourced
strong, sustained,
military
and
challenge
resource
to any other
military
country,
campaign
alone
against Somalia. It's
Somalia.
really
Somalia
very
has
possible. It's not
a
something
strength
that,
that must be verified.
threats,
That
yes,
may not
a bit
have,
of pressure, presence, and interest
well organized,
in
military
exploiting and
arrangements
harnessing
like
the
many other
weakness
But it
that
has a very
takes
strong
because of the internal divisions within Ethiopia, like now the Somaliland approach, and taking over the port of Berbera may look like an advantage, but I highly doubt
they were
that
taught a
it
lesson
is.
by ragtag
So
militia
what
men,
then is the way forward? Somalia is not going to give in very easily, as Mheshimiwa has put it. That one I agree. Yes, Somalia has certain weaknesses which emanate from the divisions within and challenges of governance that it faces. Ethiopia has similar weaknesses of the divisions within, and the challenges it faces. Now they will have to, in my view, instead of a military sort of exchange, they have to come to a table and find a negotiated solution to this problem. We need to think of a win-win situation. I don't know which country or organization is going to broker this. I thought of AU, I thought of IGAD. Turkey has tried to no avail, but do we find a negotiated arrangement where it will be a win-win situation that will take care of the strong nationalistic feelings of the Somali people, and the idea that they are not going to let Somaliland, go, and also try to moderate or manage the expansionist approach that Ethiopia is taking. So I'm calling for some kind of negotiation, some kind of round table discussions. I don't know who the mediator is going to be, probably the AU or IGAD or any other countries that have interests in the region. The only challenge I foresee is the pressure, the presence, and the interests of international players in the region. Where is the United States in all this? Where is China in all this? We know the side Turkey has taken. What role is there for the interests of the United States, the interests of China in the whole of this geopolitical arrangement that we have in the Horn of Africa? So I'm saying this will be peace of choice. Both countries have certain advantages and disadvantages if they went the military way. Ethiopia is not going to just ride over Somalia that easily. History has shown us that it is not going to be easy. If I may use the Kenyan speak, if they go the military way, it's going to be rough, it's going to be messy.
Before you
any other countries that have interests in the region. The only challenge I foresee is
Somalia is not
the pressure,
Ethiopia
the presence, and the interests of international players in the region. Where is
do you think it's a adventurism outside is a strategy?
No, the side Turkey
because it has been said
what role
when Eritrea, when Meles, I'm not Meles, but when the Just to hide money have left,
whole of this
Ethiopia was at its weakest.
arrangement that
It was
we
actually
have
disintegrated.
in the Horn of Africa.
And
So,
what menace could hold back were the Amhara, the Tigrayans, and the Oromos, and of course it could deal with the Oromos, but it could not deal with the Eritrea. Therefore, the secession, the rising, of Eritrea into an autonomous state, is a reflection of that moment of disintegration, which menace only managed to hold back by creating a federal state. Or a federation where all ethnic groups have the right to secede. In other words, you can move away. So it was never taken away. But by doing so, it made Ethiopia attractive to ethnic communities, and therefore they held together. Now,
do you think
this does not seem to be doing it? So is this, in your view, what is happening?
Well, it's a prof. If you call it adventure, I think it's dangerous. Very, very dangerous.
Ethiopia was
in terms of identity, particularly the
what menace could hold back
Ethiopia is a very
Amhara,
country.
and the Oromos, and of course,
and within Ethiopia itself, away
not
from
the
the
Eritrea,
Oromo,
therefore,
Tigray, and the
the
Amharic,
secession,
you have a very large
the
population of people of Somalia
into
region,
an autonomous state, is a
who,
reflection of that moment
without any evidence I can
which menace
say
only hope
that their
hold
sympathies
back
could easily
by
be
creating
with their
a federal
brothers
state,
across the
federation,
border.
where all ethnic groups have the right to secede,
with that kind
or
of
move away. So it was never taken away.
ethnic
But
profile
by doing so,
of
he
a
made
country
Ethiopia
like Ethiopia,
attractive.
it's actually probably in a number of ways more vulnerable
They held together.
than Somalia
Now,
identity-wise.
Because
If you look at the Somalia across the region, there is something uniquely Somalia that defines all of that. Whether you're talking about Mheshimiwa here, who is more of a person from Western Kenya, but when he begins to think Somali, there is something that connects to the rest of the region. That is something that Ethiopia seems to be taking for granted. And I don't think it is going to be all that easy to overrun Somalia as they think. Look at the other countries in the region. If you look at Kenya, for example, the interests of Kenya, if they have not made it very clear, taken care of in a safe, united Somalia with all its regions intact. There are things. If you look at the Somalia across the region, there is something uniquely Somalia that defines all of that. Whether you're talking about Mheshimiwa here, who is more of a person from Western Kenya, but when he begins to think Somali, there is something that connects to the rest of the region. That is something that Ethiopia seems to be taking for granted. And I don't think it is going to be all that easy to overrun Somalia as they think. Look at the other countries in the region. If you look at Kenya, for example, the interests of Kenya, if they have not made it very clear, taken care of in a safe, united Somalia with all its regions intact. There are things we cannot afford to do right now. Even if the country wanted to support Ethiopia in this endeavor, we will do it with a lot of caution. Because a greater proportion of this country, which is economically strong and rising, as you can see, would have sympathies with Somalia, with Somalia. So I think it's a misadventure. It is something based on probably frustration because they badly need access to the sea. Ethiopian power and suzerainty was built around the control of the ports of Massawa and Assam. With that gone, with Eritrea, they have nowhere to go. It is to their advantage to come to the round table and negotiate for a win-win situation. Something winning for Somalia, something that will be a win to Ethiopia. If they go the military way, I have the feeling that Somalia is going to have the last laugh, if you ask me.
Thank you. Let me hear Kibi first. This is hand and yes.
Actually, mine was a follow-up question to Mheshimiwa Yusuf, and we are seeing Abiy, working around this after the Tigray war, and this was after, we know the JRD brought about a lot of nationalistic, fervor in the country. So my question is, how important is Abiy, trying to push this Cushitic alliance at the expense of international allies, including China and now in the regions, IGAD, AU, he doesn't have the support. So at what extent does he want to do this, and to what benefit? And do you have an answer to his possible exit in this conundrum?
I think, Abiy, if you look at the personality of Abiy, mother, he said his mother had dreamt that he was going to be the empire of Ethiopia. He's a self-confident person with illusions of grand power. And to him, Ethiopia is just a stepping stone. The same factor that is driving his desire to have a naval base on the Red Sea. Because Ethiopia does not really need a port. It is landlocked. There are many countries that are landlocked. It controls 95% of what comes in and out of Djibouti. And it has absolute control. The Ethiopian customs are based on the port. So when goods land in Djibouti, they don't go through the processing. It's not like Rwandan or Ugandan goods arriving in Mombasa. They arrive in a port that is Ethiopian, controlled by Ethiopia. That is the concession that they have from the Djibouti. And they have built an infrastructure, the railway, the road. If you go to Djibouti and you take a helicopter and look at the road to Ethiopia, trucks from the port of Djibouti line up all the way to the border. This is one of the largest kind of logistic and truck movement in Africa. There's no way. So a lot of their stuff goes through there. It is safe. There is no problem. So the problem is not a port. They're not using a port is a euphemism. What they want is a naval base. And Ethiopia is another landlocked country that has a naval. They have a navy. Did you know that? That they have a navy. They have a standing navy. Every day, the naval headquarters is now in Bahar Dar, which is in the Amhara region. Every day they get up in the uniform, and then there are sailors in Djibouti. They have ships in the sea. They raise the Ethiopian army every morning and salute it as the Ethiopian Navy in Djibouti. It's almost like having your own naval facility. So what Abiy wants is to build a greater Ethiopia. And he has always believed that Eritrea is part of that, Somalia is part of that. And having a naval base and in Somaliland is part of that aspiration. And given the fact that he is facing serious internal problems in the Amhara region, in Tigray, he is increasingly looking at the possibility of creating a greater Cushitic nation, which stretches from the Sudan border to the Indian Ocean and to Somalia. And I also think he's looking at at the global crisis as one of his aides. You know, there's a growing global disorder. You can see what Israel can do with impunity. Not only does it do what it wants with Gaza, but now they have invaded a sovereign state across the border. And have you had anybody complain about it? Have you had the Security Council calling for an emergency meeting? So I think to a certain extent, Abiy thinks if he's strong enough, he can get away with having his naval base in. So that's why I don't see an exit strategy, because a step back for him means he's finished. The next thing, there would be a coup d'etat, and you would hear his body has been found somewhere. That's the Ethiopia way of doing things. Yeah. I think also I wanted to I fully agree with the professor on those points that he had raised. But one thing that we don't understand a lot, and as a student of the Horn of Africa and particularly the Horn of Africa and Ethiopia, part of my family actually extends into the Somali region of Ethiopia. I don't come from northeastern, but there are communities that my ancestral family would say are in the Somali region of Ethiopia and in Somaliland. So I've always had an interest in that historical background to the region. Ethiopia was an imperial state. Menelik, who was a very powerful figure, captured the Oromo nation. He captured the Gurages, he captured the Afar region. He then eventually captured the Somali region. And Ethiopia was a beneficiary of the 1884 Berlin Conference, to which Africa was subdivided. It was a black African imperial power. And it has kept that with the support of Western countries, also been the only Christian, the Coptic Church, is that Menelik got support from being a Christian island in the middle of an Islamic orgy. So they have supported that concept, and it has kept its diverse and divided ethnic group through the barrel of the gun. It's not a democracy. If you rebel against the center, they send the military to subdue you. So Meles Zenawi found a solution to buy time. He delayed the breakup of the imperial power by decentralizing power and creating semi-autonomous regions. The Tigray region, the Amhara region, the southern state, the Afar region. And some people may say that this was the Balkanization of Ethiopia. But he was a genius. If he didn't do that when the TPLF came to power, Ethiopia may not have existed in the form it exists at the moment. But it can only be kept together by power, by a strong center. The center must hold. Now the problem is that the center is weakening. The center has too many fronts. And if it opens another center, another conflict relating to Somalia, then there's a danger that Ethiopia would not survive as a united country. And you can remember that Eritrea, during the Eritrean struggle, because of the Somali-Ethiopia conflict, Somalia supported Eritrea. Isaias Afwerki was based in Mogadishu. He traveled with Somali diplomatic passport. Meles Zenawi of the TPLF was also based in Mogadishu. Actually, Afwerki speaks Somali. He has conversations in Somali quite often when you see him meeting Somali leaders. And as a result of the training and the armed supplies provided by Somalia, Eritrea was eventually able to break away from Ethiopia. And as a result, Ethiopia also used its influence to create the breakdown of Somalia, the collapse of Somalia. Ethiopia has played a big role. As a result of the training and the armed supplies provided by Somalia, Eritrea was eventually able to break away from Ethiopia. And as a result, Ethiopia also used its influence to create the breakdown of Somalia, the collapse of Somalia. Ethiopia has played a big role. So in a way, these two countries are their own enemies. They have played against each other to the detriment of their own existence. Ethiopia lost Eritrea because of Somalia's support. The Somali state collapsed because the Ethiopian state provided support to the Somali clan groups, Somaliland, Puntland, and dismembered Somalia to the extent that it became a failed state, as we know. It's only now that it's coming up. So the conflict between Ethiopia and Somalia could be a mutually destructive, I would say, conflict, just as superpowers directly using their nuclear capabilities, mutual destruction. Ethiopian conflict could be.
Yeah, that's why, just in addition to what Mheshimiwa was saying, I started by arguing that Ethiopia is actually a victim of its history. If you remember, that's I started my argument. In the 15th century, when Europeans were looking for an alternative route to the east, to avoid the pressure from the Arabs, there was this wild rumor in Europe. We're talking about rumors area, wild rumor in Europe that somewhere in Africa there was this legendary Christian king called Prester John.
Prester John, yes.
Yeah. And finally, when quote unquote they discovered Ethiopia played the Prester John because of their Christian origins. That's why Ethiopia was actually the only black nation that attended the Berlin Conference, yes, where the African melody was literally shared among European powers. So it had similar status, kind of, with Germany, France, and Britain. That has never quite left the national psyche of the country that we are talking about. It defined some level of expansionist tendencies in subsequent years. I have tried to look at the kind of history that is taught in Ethiopian primary school and secondary schools. It is actually Ethiopia as an imperial power, nothing else. So the children grow up knowing that we are the people, and our destiny is to control the destiny of others. And that is actually where the fundamental problem lies. If we can take up Somalia, if we can take up Eritrea one more time, if we can take a bit of Kenya, why not? Because that is who we are in our DNA, superior to any other. So those notions, probably if they are not managed, then they lead to what I described earlier as a misadventure. Or if you see it as an adventure, actually it's a dangerous one.
Yeah, interestingly though, is that we're talking of the imperial power is Abyssinia. Abyssinia is now at war. The Amhara region is at war. And for the first time, Ethiopia has a president who comes from a subject nation.
Yes.
The Oromos, a colonized.
The periphery of the empire.
Yes, exactly.
So, and he has an obligation to prove that after all, we are not peripheral in the Ethiopian project.
Yes.
We are part and parcel of it.
And that is a paradox of Abiy.
Yeah.
That one would have expected, and while the Oromo continue to fight him, one would have expected that upon getting to power, he will pave way for the exit of Oromo people and the creation of Oromia.
Exactly.
But now, he went on to strengthen the Abyssinia, which traditionally are the oppressors of the Oromo. So that's the paradox of that person.
Yeah, but it's a paradox that is understandable to the psychologists.
Yes, Dennis, yes.
Yeah, let me finish this.
No, sorry. Yeah.
That paradox probably is understandable to the psychologists,
Yes.
because they tell us that the children of oppression, people born out of oppression, they become very good oppressors.
Oh, yes. That's but that's the notion of Great Britain.
Yes.
Great Britain was the most oppressed by the Great Roman Empire. So when
And the Vikings as well.
even before the Viking, if you look at the Roman baths and all the Roman culture, the place they liked most was Britain.
That's it.
And even the only known black Roman emperor is Aurelius. He spent much of his time in Britain. And it is not a surprise that Britain now dreamt of owning the world.
That's it.
And created an empire when the sun does not set.
Yeah. But the German foreign minister told Churchill when he said that the sun does not set in the British Empire, he said yes, the sun does not set in the British Empire because God does not trust them in darkness.
Thank you, Prof. And my seniors, Dr. and Mheshimiwa. For me, I was just thinking through and more of an observation and also a question. Is the current issue between Somalia and Ethiopia more of a clash of personalities? If I take you back in 2018, there's what we call the brotherly love between Abiy and Farmajo. And somehow, if you read through, you'll be told that Farmajo used to look up to Abiy. And there was the agreement, which I remember Farmajo had agreed to give Ethiopia access to the 5 Indian Ocean ports, that is Kismayo, Balawe, Basaso, Bardera, and Hubli in North Mogadishu. And during that time also when Farmajo was facing internal issues, Abiy would come and help. But now with Hassan Sheikh in power, the leadership has changed, and you see Abiy now goes ahead and signs agreement with Somaliland, basically knowing that this is a key issue within Somalia. And so for me, is it more of a clash of personality between Abiy and Hassan Sheikh that is causing some of these issues, that's pushing Ethiopia to knowing very well the historical issues between Somalia and Somaliland, and them going and signing agreement. For me, that's the first observation. And then to answer to Daktari about the interest of China, especially on China. During the FOCAC 2024, Hassan Sheikh met with President Xi on the sidelines. And as you all know, that also China has a similar crisis with Taiwan. And so China leans more with the issue of Somalia, and its purpose is more to support the reunification of the entire of Somalia, as it hopes the other countries to support the reunification of China. And I remember China pledged around 200 million yuan to Somalia to help deal with immediate issues. And so when it comes to where does China stand, I think China stands more on Somalia, knowing very well that also it has a very good relationship with Ethiopia. And Ethiopia has been one of those we call the poster boys in Africa that China always leans towards. So within that, I think China also has some crisis to deal with. Because if it's more focused more on Somalia again, and Ethiopia then going to lose that. So you'll find that I've tried to look through and see where they stand between these crises, and you see most of them are quiet. For them, we are more into the unification of Somalia, and we support the unification of Somalia, and we desire a peaceful Horn of Africa. And so for me, those are my observations.
I think one point you are missing, Dennis, is that China, that you and I study very closely, is not looking for these decentralized societies, looking for empires. So in Egypt, it has the Pharaonic Empire in mind. In Ethiopia, it is the Abyssinian Empire in mind. Remember, these are the only two countries in the BRICS. The third one is South Africa.
Yes.
And South Africa, to all intents and purposes, is a reflection of the British Crown. Is an extension, an overseas extension of the British Empire. It's a psychology you cannot divorce from the Chinese, because they think the deeper the civilization, the richer the present, and the more promising the future is. So think about that, and now you see why it is more likely to lean towards Ethiopia. Even when Somalia offers a mirror image of what challenges China is facing internationally, with that breakaway territory that is recognized by none, and so on. So I think that's something to reflect on.
Maybe, Prof, before
Yeah.
I forget something I jotted down here. Could it be China is playing some kind of positive engagement between the belligerent parties? It has demonstrated before the levels of neutrality they can go in dealing with problems, particularly in the continent of Africa, that they can easily eat from both sides of the mouth, as it were. That could be something we need to think about. The second one, the point you raised about the clash of personalities. So somebody has said that leaders are creators and creations of their environment. They are creators and the creations of their environment. We were looking at an overly imperialist Abiy versus an overly nationalist Hassan Sheikh. But then there is an environment in which they thrive on. We are saying Ethiopia has always historically been imperialist. And on the other side, Somalia has always demonstrated a very high degree of the ism we call nationalism. Could be those environments clashing too, as the leaders are also clashing? Think about it.
Yeah. Actually, on the personalities, it is Ethiopia that had provoked this conflict. Out of the blue, Hassan Sheikh didn't have a problem with Abiy until then. The Ethiopian troops were present. He constantly used to go to Addis. He believed Abiy was somebody to do business with. He had a problem with Eritrea, because Eritrea was training Somali soldiers provided by Farmajo. And there were rumors that in fact there were thousands of Somalis being trained in Eritrea secretly. Nobody knew the numbers, because Farmajo was creating an army that he was going to use against his opponents to settle scores and things like that. So there was a mistrust between Hassan and Isaias when Hassan came to power. It is only when, out of the blue, Abiy came out with this idea of saying, I've signed an agreement with a breakaway state, and I'm going to have a military base and a port, whether Somalia liked or not. And this is a major breach in Africa's efforts to strengthen the African nation state, particularly in the case of Somalia, where the African Union was playing a big role in creating stability. Here was an African leader, host to the African Union, saying, I don't care about that, I'm going to just unravel and break that up. So I think that is, I wouldn't say it is a personality driven, because now Hassan Sheikh is in bed with Isaias, who was enemy number one 1 or 2 years ago. So things have changed quite a lot. And also the other factor is that Abiy is mercurial, unpredictable. For example, he had a very close kind of bromance with Isaias, and now they don't even speak. The situation has really gone from bad to worse. And it is Eritrea that helped, Isaias helped Abiy to contain the Tigray rebellion. If he didn't get into that conflict, probably the TPLF would have come back to power in Addis. So he doesn't seem to have any, what should I say, loyalty to, and Isaias feels that he's been betrayed by Abiy, and that's why he's creating an alliance to keep this madman away from invading Somalia or Eritrea in the future. On the issue of China, I think China has always had a policy of peaceful coexistence, resolving conflicts through dialogue. So there's no comparison between Somalia and Ethiopia. Even for Turkey, Turkey does more trade with Ethiopia. Ethiopia has 100 million population. It's a very big market, a very powerful country. So the two are not in competition when it comes to that case. Anyone would choose Ethiopia. But Ethiopia now is in turmoil. All the industrial parks built by the Chinese in Tigray have been destroyed. In the Amhara region, done. In the Oromo region where there's a conflict, completely gone. All the Chinese who are working and who have invested in those industries have fled the country, apart from Hawassa, which is in the southern, closer to the Kenyan border. That's the only industrial park, Chinese-built industrial park that is operating. Ethiopia's economy has gone into a free fall. The birr has collapsed. They're now dependent on a rescue mission by IMF. So it's a country that really is no longer what it was. It was the fastest growing economy in Africa and in the world, 10% and above for 10 years. And if they had continued on that trajectory, it will become an African industrial power very quickly. That dream is gone. And so I think in this particular case, China is looking at preserving the status quo, saying we must respect territorial borders, we must, they're not saying anything outrageous or out of sync, because they're simply saying this is what we believe in. And the other problem is that Somaliland has interfered in the internal affairs of China. It has recognized Taiwan as a sovereign state. Very stupid thing to do for a successionist state, for a superpower, a country with a veto power in the United Nations. So I think also the Chinese are saying, look here, it is affecting the consensus the Chinese have been building around the world to isolate Taiwan. So I think the last thing they will want to have is an independent Somaliland in the Horn of Africa, in a strategic position in the Horn of Africa. That it would not. But also surprisingly, even for the Russians who are in the BRICS and who have always supported Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is Coptic, it's an Orthodox, so there's a religious affinity, a very close religious affinity, and a very close contact between Abyssinia and the Russian Empire. Abyssinia used to send emissaries to the Russian, the Tsar period, to St. Peter's or to Moscow. So they've always had that tradition, and there's always a religious and cultural exchange. So I was quite surprised when Lavrov publicly said, this is our line, we respect Ethiopia is wrong. It should not have any ambitions against a sovereign state. It must respect Somalia. And that has been the case. There isn't a single country, actually, that has come out to support the Ethiopian line. So Ethiopia is isolated internationally.
Let me hear from Agri. Agri, you've not talked today. What's happening in your corner?
I've been listening more today because I was taking notes. But my contribution is I was fascinated by Daktari's observation that to have a strong, sustained military intervention is going to be very costly. And he said it is a dangerous adventure. But I wanted to speak to just the behavior of both Ethiopia and Somalia. We all know these are some of the oldest civilizations on the continent, dating back from the earliest centuries. And so they have built they have this unique character of being very united when faced with a common enemy from outside. Somalis might quarrel among themselves, clan by clan, but when someone goes there to try and grab their land, they are usually very united. You saw it when they fought with Kenya, the ICJ. Now you're seeing the same when Ethiopia is trying to sort of go ahead with that controversial MOU. So for me, I think it's something that is pitting two countries that are very nationalistic when faced with an outside enemy, but they are very divided among themselves internally. So these internal divisions are the weaknesses that each side is trying to exploit. But I think it is a misjudgment on the side of Ethiopia to imagine that someone who apparently looks weak could be easily conquered just because they probably don't have a strong army or they don't have a strong institution or something. Where Somalis lack in the absence of strong institutions or just protective statehood as we may know it, I think they compensate that with a very united mindset. The feeling of belonging to that community, being Somali itself is very united. And I was very curious to learn that even in Somaliland itself, there are clans that do not want to separate from the wider Somalia because they feel more connected as a community, as a nation of being Somali. And I also was very fascinated to learn that it is Somaliland that actually keeps the
soul.
Yes, the historical record of Somalia as a nation. So how does this dispute therefore pan out as we may expect? My view is that the interests of the international community is likely to affect how this dispute goes from here. I understand there is a likelihood of the two countries actually going to war, fighting, militarily, because of the various breaks that may be imposed by the international community. If you look at the allies of Somalia and Ethiopia, just beyond the Horn, you look at the UAE, they have interest in Ethiopia, they have interest in Somalia. That could be one of the breaks. You look at the US, for example, you look at China, they have interests in Ethiopia, they have interest in Somalia. Their interest is to keep these countries intact as we know them today. A conflict is likely to derail their ambitions. For example, Mheshimiwa spoke of the industrial park in Hamasa. A war could, slow down that kind of investment. Similarly, we've seen Somalia and China signing some fisheries kind of pact. It's an investment that Somalis are really talking about. Interestingly, estimating the fisheries sector to be about $2 billion. Of course, Somalis do not eat fish themselves, but they have seen it as a very good way of, sustaining the trade with these other partners. But if you look at the neighborhood itself, each of Ethiopia's and Somalia's neighbors has unresolved border issue with the two countries. We haven't finalized the ACJ decision. We have not implemented it. I think there is an undemarcated border between Ethiopia and Somalia. If you look at Google, there's a part that
There's no border.
Yes.
There is no border.
There's a part they usually
Go
just
50 kilometers this way or
Yes.
50 kilometers that.
Yes.
Depends on who's strong enough.
Yes. So there's a part that they usually just draw dotted lines, even on Google Maps, because it's undetermined. Kenya itself also routinely has this kind of disputes with Ethiopia. Eritrea.
With Ethiopia, we finished.
Yeah. Surprisingly, I don't know why we didn't use the same formula, because Haile Selassie and Kenyatta.
Yeah, they say
Ethiopia gave land to us, and we gave Ethiopia a bit of land, and it was resolved. Nobody knows that story.
Yeah, so we left at the Lake Turkana
Yes.
because there was now the issue of South Sudan and the Arabic Triangle, and that's where the Ethiopia-Kenya border was not fully completed. But beyond that, it is done. What you have said is the truth, that we have a problem with the maritime boundary, but with the land boundary, with the Somalia, we don't have.
I actually had a little story about this Elma. This is when I just became a member of parliament. We traveled to the border with the Minister of Immigration, and then Kajwan, the late Kajwan. He was opening up a border post, and when we arrived there, the southern Sudanese came, and they started shooting up in the air, and we fled. We couldn't do anything. We fled back to what was Kenyan territory, safe Kenyan territory, and that border post was never opened. You know, and South Sudan is a friendly country. I never understood why they had to shoot at this.
But now I think
No, it was the government.
that we are saying now it is very
And they changed our
people.
motorcade back to where they thought was the right boundary.
So if you look at Ethiopia and Sudan, also they have unresolved border issue. So it suits these countries in their own to push for a status quo, which is a united Somalia, and Ethiopia is trying to control integrity of Somalia, because you don't want to open Pandora's box where people now say, oh, so you say they should be these members of Somalia, therefore let's first deal with this issue. I think if you look at the statements that have been coming out of state houses in the region where Somali president has been visiting this week, there's a paragraph that have been put about territorial integrity, sovereignty of each other's countries. I think that is very pointing, especially since they are also calling for a smooth transition from Artemis to House A or so on. And so my view is, just to sum it up, I think it will depend also on the administrations that exist in these countries. My colleague spoke of previously when Farmajo was in power in Somalia. Abiy and Farmajo signed an MOU to jointly build 4 ports. This was never developed, probably because of funding or priorities changed. But it also points to the leadership styles that exist in these capitals. Perhaps Prime Minister Abiy may want to be very imposing, and if he finds resistance in dealing with another person, probably he will try to choose another method to force him to do it. But the question is, if he's removed from power, I don't want to say God forbid, because eventually he will go.
In a violent way.
Yes. Will Ethiopia therefore have the same skill to push for this level base? Lately, I'm sure you've realized, after various critical comments from the Western capitals about Ethiopia's adventure, the diplomats have been changing the language a bit. They've been saying we are willing to have this access through peaceful means, which is at variance with what the Prime Minister had been saying, especially when he addressed his political party rally I think in August or September, where he said we are very determined to get this thing. It's what we need. And therefore, this tinkering of the language, I think it's a pointer that they have also realized you don't get what you want by just bulldozing your way, and especially if your international partners are warning you against it. So something is likely to change if the administrations this shift, and I think that is what we should be looking for.
So in short, when we now begin to talk about the way forward, we are saying that there is no likelihood of the initiatives that have been taken so far to resolve this conflict, likely because of course the Kenyan initiative failed after a few weeks. Then we have now Ankara process which has also failed, because Somalia has insisted that Ethiopia has to respect its sovereignty before they can have any kind of a talk. The Turkey and Egypt seems to have basically resoundingly and irreversibly thrown their lot behind Somalia. And now Eritrea, afraid that it might be the next in line after Somalia, then has decided to couple this tripartite alliance with Egypt. And Egypt seems to be taking advantage of what is happening in order to deal with Ethiopia over other issues other than just that, one of which is the Nile waters, the other being the Red Sea, because of the Suez Canal, but more importantly because of its new role as a major, IT country in terms of the international superhighway. A communication superhighway. It is at the heart of it. So we don't want to sound Jeremiah, in a sense that we're just spelling doomsday. But I think, as Dr. said in his conclusion, I think we need to begin to look for opportunities to resolve this conflict peacefully. And there's no other way of doing it other than getting Ethiopia to recognize the sovereignty of Somalia. If Somaliland will ever have to be independent, let that be a decision for the Somalis, not for a third party. Now, the recognition of Somaliland by Ethiopia, particularly by giving them land to build a new embassy, is itself escalating the situation. It is not helping the situation. The situation that Ethiopia wants to insist on being a member of AU, peace or the stabilization mission after the exit of Artemis itself is a provocation. Holding or hosting a summit of a ministerial conference of troop contributing countries in Addis Ababa without notifying or inviting Somalia is further provocation. And therefore we are not seeing the escalation of the problem, we are seeing escalation. And that's why we now need to call as professionals, as practitioners in the region, that Ethiopia needs to do more to de-escalate the situation. We need to do more to at least respect the sovereignty of Somalia. I think that's the main conclusion we would make. I want to see whether there's another burning issue that would add to this. Unfortunately, this we'll have to leave at a certain stage. We still have some time, good time, but routinely, what we do, we allow our team, the media team, to just have a short, exclusive, focus on yourself as a member of the On Talk, and everybody else, not one person. Just what are your takeaways from this particular think tank today, or this particular forum today? What are your takes? And I normally moderate that as well. You don't have to go anywhere else. You just need to be where you are. Then we'll kind of, in a conclusive manner, ask what your takeaways from this particular forum are. And but before we do that, as Mheshimiwa and Daktari prepares for their, do the punchline. It's a punchline. That's what they call it. Then I'll hear from Kibi. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question on linked to the way forward. Is you mentioned that the attempt by Kenya or President William Ruto to mediate between Ethiopia and Somalia was rejected. And the question is, when we look at the way forward, where does this place Kenya? Because initially we saw when President William Ruto came to power, we saw some camaraderie with Afwerki. Ethiopia, the Prime Minister was here. He's a key stakeholder with the LAPSET project. And today we are seeing, HSM in Nairobi also trying to get Kenya support, in this conflict. So, in all these, issue and in terms of the interest in the region, how do we see Kenya moving forward? How does Kenya behave in trying to solve this issue?
I think Mheshimiwa would be better off to answer that question from his other hat as the member of Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee. Where really is our relationship with Somalia in this regard? Is it the way we have seen it that according to the Somalis, if I do remember what they are saying, this is the best time in terms of diplomatic relations between Kenya and Somalia? It has never been better than this. This is according to the Somalis. For us Kenyans, what's our view?
I think the view is identical, it's mutual. I think we've never had a better relationship between our two countries. There is a trusting relationship, and as you can see, President Hassan Sheikh has made more visits to Kenya to consult with President William Ruto than any other leader in the world. There is a feeling that, in fact, President Hassan feels comfortable with Hassan Sheikh. At the same time, President Ruto has removed many of the barriers and the conditions, and has really helped to remove that mistrust, that traditional mistrust between the two countries. For example, he has not pursued the maritime issue aggressively, which is the right thing to do because the ICJ has already made a stand on it, and unless you forcibly occupy that territory. The relationship we have with Jubaland is very good, and to a certain extent the collaboration on our border in regards to Al-Shabaab is very good. There's a very good cooperation between our security forces, our intelligence services, and I think I would agree with the fact that, in fact, we've never had a better relationship with our neighbor in Somalia. But that has also meant that Ethiopia is a little bit suspicious of our role. In the sense it feels that we are tilting towards Somalia. And I say that there is a big problem here. We've all agreed that the security situation in the Horn of Africa is disturbing. Something needs to be done about it. But unfortunately, there is no respected big brother state that could come in and say, you guys, let's talk and resolve our issues through dialogue. There is no statesman with a clout whom we can call upon. For example, I see Obasanjo is often seen here. When Nyerere was alive, he got involved with the Great Lake crisis and helped to bring about peace in Burundi. Mandela was involved in the DRC conflict and so on. So we don't have a regional figure or a state that now is trusted enough and has the gravitas to sort of say, let's come together and have a discussion. We have failed in Sudan, we're failing now with Ethiopia and Somalia. And then the global environment also does not add support to peaceful discussion and dialogue. The center, the global center, the United Nations is weak because the powerful countries are at conflict. They cannot enforce a ceasefire in Sudan. They cannot enforce a ceasefire in Gaza, Lebanon, Israel. Israel does whatever it can do. So this is a period for rogue powers to thrive. I think one mysterious regional power that could play a role could be the United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates has very, very close links with Abiy. The MBZ has very personal relationship with Abiy. And they funded his military campaign in Tigray. They provided the drone, the technology that turned the war around. So I think they have a big influence on him, and they also have a big influence in Somalia. But at the moment it appears as if they are, again, more on the side of Ethiopia than Somalia. Because in the case of Ethiopia, they have the ear of the president, of the prime minister, while in the case of Somalia, they're involved in Puntland and Jubaland, but they're not very influential with Hassan Sheikh.
But then
I think-
again,
Let me reserve, in the interest of time, Dr. Talib, let me reserve a very prime time for yourself and prime time for Mheshimiwa.
But I thought we have said everything we
No.
could say.
We were answering his question, and I've not say Kenya has become very strategic, given where we are coming from Farmajo, and because of that, we have become adept in terms of shaping our own diplomatic relations with Somalia. In the past, we depended on Ethiopia, because Ethiopia was a military power. It is the power America trusted. And Kenya has always relied on the American military support in the Horn. But we found ourselves in a very difficult corner after the rise of Abiy, who actively isolated Kenya. And when I was doing the Cushitic Alliance kind of thing, I was trying to find answers to why Kenya finds itself isolated from that part. And therefore, Kenya's diplomatic relations with Somalia is maturing, and it is in its own terms, which is why Hassan Sheikh can trust Nairobi, because it knows that Nairobi is not dependent in terms of its relations with any other. Nairobi is also good as a broker for Somalia with the United States, because Kenya is also in very good terms with the United States today. And in this transition, there's a lot that Somalia or Mogadishu is depending on Nairobi for brokerage. And that's why Hassan Sheikh would be here possibly once a month, or Ruto would be going to Somalia to one other time, because there's a lot of consultation. And that consultation is going to intensify as we get towards December, because of the transition of ATMIS. And Kenya has the ultimate responsibility to ensure that Al-Shabaab does not take advantage of that transition gap. Because a vacuum that is prolonged all the way up to February would mean that Al-Shabaab would get a very serious resurgence, including possibly taking over some of the major places. I am told that there's a lot of handing over. This is practical. of Somali forces, of the Artemis or the AU forces, to the Somali military. The figure now, by yesterday, I think it was 23. What they call the forward bases. What are they called? The bases.
Forward operating bases.
The forward operating bases. 23 of them have been handed over to the Somali government, and none of them has been retaken by the Al-Shabaab, which is a credit to them. Obviously, that has put budgetary constraints. Somalia was operating on a budget of less than 30 million. Now it has to double that because it has to include these changes into its budget. And and the taxes have risen, but at the same time, it is to have its budgetary constraints in terms of dealing with this. So, Kibi, now you see where we're coming from. So Kenya abandoned the path to peace, peaceful negotiation with Ethiopia.
Yeah, but the other thing, Professor,
Yeah.
is that Ethiopia has always been the African nation that has the strongest links to the United States.
Yes.
At one time, the United States had a military base in Eritrea. Ethiopia is the strongest ally that the United States has had. And Ethiopia has been a trusted friend. Addis was the center of all those activities. The recent move by the United States to anoint William Ruto in Kenya as America's #1 friends in Africa has not helped our relationship with Ethiopia.
Yes.
And Abiy considered himself to be, the torchbearer. Now an upstart country, Ethiopia doesn't have a lot of respect for Kenya, by the way. Because I remember that I one time came from Yemen. I was heading to London, and I had gone to Yemen on a visit many years ago. And unfortunately, the only flight I could get was to Addis, to catch a flight from Addis to Rome and then to London. So when I arrived, there was a gap between my next flight and this customs pass. The immigration officer saw my passport, and then he said, "Oh, why do you have this Kenyan passport?" I said, "I'm from Kenya." And he says, "No, you're an Ethiopian." And other Ethiopians come with American passport. And to go down so much that you come back to your country of origin with a Kenyan passport is really a shame for us. We didn't have to go that time.
You didn't have to go that way.
Yeah. For Kenya to upstage and become the favored friend of America in Africa, Africa's man, and for Ruto to be the Africa man in Africa, is a big blow to Abiy and Ethiopia's kind of pride. Yeah, how come Kenya? So I think that is one factor. And now the other factor I said in the case of Somalia is that also I see that there's some major development. The Kenyan media doesn't report that. The Jubaland state has doubled its military force. And it has now pushed Al-Shabaab all the way to Boni Forest. The other day they carried out a serious attack, which means the Jubaland state military, which is supported also by the Somali military, is pushing Al-Shabaab to a corner. And President Mugabe traveled from Kismayu to the border by road, which is very unusual given the fact that Al-Shabaab controls the areas in between here and Kismayu. So there is a growing, and Kenyans are involved in that. The Kenyan security forces have been involved in the training and the development of those forces.
Good. Now, I think let's get to the media team. We really want to get a close kind of coverage of the takeaways of ourselves, the main participants here, so that Hot Talk can have some good library or of the repertoire of issues that have been discussed. right? So I'll start with Mheshimiwa, and I'll ask you, from the discussions that we have had in the relationship between Somalia and Ethiopia, what would be your main takeaways?
I think the first thing that we have learned here is that this Somali-Ethiopia conflict is not a necessary conflict. It's not the Somali-Ethiopia conflict appears to us as an artificial conflict that can be avoided. We say that because Ethiopia has to respect the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Somalia, and if they need to engage with Somalia, they should engage with the recognized government in Mogadishu rather than with the breakaway Somaliland leadership and region. So I think there is a feeling that this could be a conflict that can be avoided. But unfortunately, what we've also learned is that there is no exit. There is no a drawback in this conflict. Prime Minister Abiy is focused on getting what he wants because he considered Somalia as the weakest link. And our sad conclusion was that a conflict was inevitable. But if there was a conflict, there are no winners. Both Somalia and Ethiopia will be losers. And it will be a conflict that would lead to mutual destruction. And therefore, what I think now is for us to think, how can we avert a conflict between these two sisterly states and find an amicable exit, a face-saving exit for Prime Minister Abiy, and a way in which some of those issues related to the port and access to the sea can be found for Ethiopia. And Somalia has consistently said they're willing to provide access to their ports for Ethiopia's imports and exports. So I think there's that concern of what can be done to de-escalate the conflict between the two countries. And who can do that? Because it appears as if the United Nations is not focused, the African Union is not focused, IGAD is not focused. So whom within this region, within the Horn region, can come together to find a more amicable and peaceful resolution of this particular conflict? I think that is the takeaway again. I think that there's a danger in the Horn of Africa, particularly with Ethiopia and Somalia. And if nothing is not done to de-escalate and bring the two leaders together in a conference, in a dialogue, in an agreement, then surely we're going to see an escalation which would be detrimental not only to Somalia and Ethiopia but to the whole region.
Two things as takeaway from my end. One is that when we look at the Ethiopian approach to the whole thing, the idea of taking up the ports and having a lot of interests there, in my view as a historian, it bespeaks of the notions of spheres of influence. Imperial or territorial annexation and territorial occupation. And when I think all this, I find them to be historical realities, which I will strongly say Ethiopia needs to recognize that such realities of territorial expansion, territorial annexation, and occupation of other countries' territories, it should leave it to where it belongs, and that is in history. Number two, just taking a clue from what Mheshimiwa Hassan was saying earlier, it has gotten to a point where we strongly need to urge the international community those key countries and nations that have interest in the Horn of Africa to increase what I see as pressure, their presence, and also work on initiatives that will de-escalate the hostilities between the two countries so that they don't degenerate into war. Friends, war has no eyes. It affects those who are in it and those who are outside. Thank you very much.
I think it's just important for the leaders of all countries to read the room. That one, nobody is interested in seeing this dispute escalate to something that will be out of control. We've been told before that war has no eyes. Probably it also doesn't have ears, but it has legs and hands to hold a gun and shoot whoever comes in the way. So I think for Ethiopia and Somalia, they should realize they have a very important stake in the Horn of Africa. I think Ethiopia and Somalia have a very important stake in the Horn of Africa. If they quarrel among themselves, of course, the winner may be Al-Shabaab, which is a common enemy for all these countries in the region, and therefore cooperation is cheaper. We will spend less if they discuss this issue out of the available diplomatic channels that can help resolve this issue and therefore settle each other's needs. So I think for me, they have an opportunity to stop the tension from boiling and therefore attracting other interests that they may not be in control. Thank you.
This conflict was avoidable. I think it was not necessary, or actually necessary, to continue escalating it from the point of Ethiopia. But now that we are here, I think it's the region is in crisis, so is the world, and I think the mistrust amongst the Horn of Africa, neighbors is, putting these conflicts in a situation that we don't know how then it will span out. But as the experts have said, I think the solution is negotiation. I think the solution is getting to the table and actually doing what is supposed to be done, because I think there are international frameworks that guide states on how to behave in such a situation. So I think what I drew from this conversation is we are in a very tough situation, and I think decisions have to be made by the right people.
Very good. Justice?
Ethiopia-Somalia conflict is coming at a very critical hour where ATMIS is exiting by the end of this year. And this one leaves a gap between December and February where the Al-Shabaab may take the gap or may take the opportunity to revert the success already gained.
The mechanisms and initiatives that have been taken so far to address the Ethiopia-Somalia conflict over the Somali territory of Somaliland seems not to have made a great success. That applies to regional initiatives by Kenya and others. It also applies to international initiatives by Turkey, which have not resolved the conflict. Activities that are being currently undertaken by Ethiopia seems to be escalating rather than de-escalating the situation. The decision to give land to Somaliland and to allow it to build an embassy as a sovereign state in Addis Ababa itself is a provocation, is a further provocation of the situation, and particularly Somalia. And at the same time, hosting, a ministerial, conference of troop contributing countries without inviting or notifying Somalia, for that matter, itself does contribute to the escalation of the tensions in the region. And this happens at a time when we see the region undergoing a major transition, a transition from the Africa Transition Mission in Somalia, ATMIS, and now to the African support and stabilization mission in Somalia, which is more of peace building and post-conflict reconstruction and development framework, rather than that requires cooperation with Somalia by all the involved states, rather than looking outward to international community. So this is one time when the region can contribute its best to the recovery of Somalia after 3 decades of civil war. Sovereignty and territorial integrity is a cornerstone of our world order. And as a result, after the African Union, IGAD, the United Nations, and other international actors need to come to the party and urge Ethiopia to recognize the territorial integrity of Somalia as a prerequisite for future stabilization of the region. The region is hurting from the escalation of the conflict in Somalia and of Ethiopia, of Somalia's territory, arising from the MOU that was signed between Somalia and Somaliland and Ethiopia. We urge Somaliland to carry out peaceful elections within its borders, and for the people of Somaliland to consider that it is in their interest to be part and parcel of the region in a useful manner that does not seem to escalate the conflict in an already turbulent region. And with that, then I want to take this opportunity to thank our guest tonight, our expert guest to this morning. We have Mheshimiwa Hassan Yusuf Abdi, who is a member of parliament in Nairobi, Kamukuji constituency, and who is also a member of our parliament's Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee, and also a renowned scholar in the region, based at the University of Nairobi. I also want to thank our scholar, Dr. Kenneth Obongi, who is the former head of Department of History and Archaeology, and also currently the Dean of the School of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Nairobi, and also a very renowned Kenyan intellectual. So, and others who are participating, we thank the media, the Nation Media House, we thank the Star, we thank the Standard, and others who are participating in this forum. And we now say that this is the end of today's session, and we will convene next week to again take a reflective look at the development in the Horn of Africa. Thank you.